So last night in Washington, D.C., two innocent humans, an innocent couple, were hatefully murdered simply for being at a Jewish event. Let's play the video just to break down the whole situation.
First developing news out of Washington, D.C. Authorities confirming tonight 2 Israeli embassy staff members have been killed in a targeted shooting right outside the Jewish Museum. D.C. police saying the 30-year-old suspect yelled "Free Palestine" after he was taken into custody. Good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Meeback.
And I'm Claudine Wong. Metropolitan Police in Washington just gave an update on that shooting in the last hour. Police say they received a call about 4 hours ago of a shooting outside of the Capitol Jewish Museum. An event was going on inside. Officers say they found a man and a woman dead at the scene. The suspect was taken into custody inside the museum shortly thereafter. Police have identified the suspected shooter as 30-year-old Elias Rodriguez of Chicago. Investigators were also able to retrieve the weapon. A witness at the scene says the museum was hosting an annual event of young Jewish diplomats.
Did see whom I believe is the perpetrator. Again, I did not see the shooting. He seemed very distressed, so I assumed he was a witness to it, and I offered him water. He said yes. I went to get him water. The moment I handed him the glass of water, he then whipped out a red Jordanian keffiyeh and said "Free Palestine," and then the security ran in.
You have to be a different level of maniac to murder 2 people, run inside of the place that they were going to, and then pretend like you're the one in distress asking for water and hydration, and then to go and to scream "Free Palestine." This is what I'm talking about. We can play dumb all we want. When people are screaming "Free Palestine," "River to the Sea," all of these different chants, we know what they mean. They mean they want to see the harm of Jews. So now you have this innocent couple, Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Lynn Milgram, who were planning their engagement. They were a young couple committed to fostering Arab and Jewish dialogue, and they were killed by this maniac. 2 young lives cut short. And this was outside of the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C. They were attending an event that was focused on Middle East bridge building. So again, these are 2 people who really were there to try to bring peace, to try to bring some understanding, to try to have some dialogue. But then you have Elias Rodriguez, who out here is shouting "Free Palestine." It's just focused on nothing but hatred. And this again shows why I keep saying, and you're going to hear Noy Lieb talk about this next week, because we did an interview that we're dropping on Tuesday that I'm really excited for you guys to see. But, you know, he explained it to me how the IDF and people who are pro-Israel are fighting because they love the people behind them. These Hamas supporters are fighting because they hate the people in front of them. And that is showcased very clearly and evidently by Elias Rodriguez, this 30-year-old from Chicago that was just detained. And, you know, I think it's worth noting that Elias Rodriguez is linked to the Party for Socialism and Liberation through, even though the group is now denying any current affiliation, but this is the background that guy has. And when I say socialism, Marxism, communism, all connected. They all lead to the demise of society and to death. Okay. And when we sit here and we talk about the bloody hands of anti-Semitism, we really have to look at a number of different places. But specifically, I want to start with the media, because the media is so corrupt and so biased to the point that it frustrates me beyond comprehension. Shout out to Jonah Plott. He has a podcast called the Being Jewish Podcast. He posted this today, and I thought that this was a really good demonstration on how this cycle tends to work, how blood libel spreads. So Hamas terrorists fabricate anti-Israel data. They send it over, and then it's reported by the Gaza Health Ministry, aka Hamas. Then it is parroted without qualification by groups like the United Nations. Then it's quickly amplified by news media without any verification. It spreads across social media by eager anti-Israel users. And then Hamas encouraged by successful communication strategy. And then the cycle starts all over again. So we see this cycle that continuously happens, this vicious cycle of it can be as fake as the news possibly can be, But once it starts in the cycle and you're trusting the source, which is a literal terrorist organization, to be the ones to relay and play telephone, it goes to United Nations, it spreads, and then even when they try to walk it back, nobody cares about the truth. Okay, so when we talk about the UN spreading lies, I want to show you a specific example. Do we have that? Yes. So this is an example of how the UN spreads a lie and the media amplifies it. So can we zoom in on that really quick? So you have the UN. So Middle East Eye, they made this just like a day or two ago. They put out a statement, 14,000 babies could die in Gaza within 48 hours without aid. The Guardian, first thing, UN says 14,000 babies could die in Gaza in next 48 hours under Israeli aid barricade. The claim was false, but almost no one corrected it. The truth never got the same reach though as a lie. I believe it's a stat that the truth is 7 times slower than a lie, and I really would dare to say it's much slower than that, because then you scroll down a little bit and you see the real truth starts to come out. You see the United Nations retracts aid chief's claim that 14,000 Gazan babies will die in 48 hours without aid. Then you have Business Times. UN walks back claim that 14,000 Gazan babies face death in 48 hours, citing misinterpretation. Oh, what a surprise. What a surprise. This blood libel has deadly consequences. Okay? That cannot be emphasized enough. Was there anything under that? I think there was another section, right? Or am I tripping? Can you zoom out of it?
You see the Jews were murdered section?
Oh, sorry, I'm tripping. So yes, the Jews were murdered. So when you look at this lie that was spread, this lie that made everybody much more emotional, this lie that made everybody more extreme, then people go and they run with that and then they start taking action. Similar to the way I say, all the rhetoric that was calling President Trump a Nazi, that is the reason, that is a driving reason why there were people trying to murder him, because that's what happens when you spread these kind of narratives. So when you have this narrative out here claiming that 14,000 babies are about to die in Gaza, even though it was retracted, people don't pay attention to the fact that it's retracted, because people allow fear to drive them much more than they will allow the truth to drive them. So then you see Jews are murdered. You see the situation where we just had this couple that was shot and killed in front of the embassy. This is how this works almost every single time. And I am not saying that Israel is perfect, but the things that they get accused of, even when it is walked back or debunked, people still run with this narrative. And it leads to the hatred and the anti-Semitism and all the chaos that we have been continuously seeing. And just a matter of fact, this whole narrative about Israel holding aid, which in my opinion, I think they should be. In my opinion, I wish they were holding the aid. I'm not even going to cap to you, because what do you mean you're in war with somebody, but you're still giving them aid? Because to me, that's crazy. But that's why y'all don't want me to be their commander in chief, because I'm pressing that big red button every time I have a reason to. But you know, the truth is that depending on where you look, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of tons of aid have gone into Gaza since October 7th. Really, it's like, I believe I saw a stat, it was like 20,000 trucks with tons of aid each have gone into Gaza bringing them aid. But what happens is Hamas hijacks it and sells it. They either keep it for themselves because the Hamas leaders are very, very rich for a reason, or they just go and they sell this aid that should be going to the Gazan civilians. Okay, so when people talk about freeing Palestine, yes, free Palestine from who? Hamas. Their jihadist leaders are the reasons why they are in the situation that they are in. Whether it's them being human hostages, whether it's them not getting aid, whether it's them barely having water in the first place, because need I remind you, prior to October 7th even, Hamas has been taking their water systems and their irrigation systems and turning them into ghetto missiles that don't even work. I want to say only a third of the missiles that Hamas made actually reached outside of Gaza, so a lot of their missiles land in their own territory. Goofy. That is how ridiculous this all is. then I really want to crack down on the rhetoric in these headlines, because I really want to emphasize that when we talk about this murder, we should be saying this innocent couple that was murdered, because everybody, I keep saying the headline everywhere is talking about how 2 Israeli embassy officials were killed in Washington, D.C. That is intentionally meant to downplay, 1, the severity of the attack, and 2, it's trying to take away some of the empathy that people will have, because they're like, oh, Israeli embassy? Because to the average ear, what that sounds like is, to people, that sounds like, oh, you're just some government person in Israel. You're just some government Zionist that's a low down, dirty person. You were probably doing something evil. That's probably why they did this to you. Like, that is the type of mind game that the mainstream media outlets are playing by saying things like this. If you just search about what happened last night, they all keep really emphasizing that they were Israeli embassy officials, to the point that people think that this happened at a government office or at the embassy. No, it did not. The facts of the matter, the truth is that the attack did not happen at the embassy. This happened at a Jewish museum, and they just happen to work at the Israeli embassy. See what I mean? And if you don't, let me just make that crystal clear. This couple, this young couple that was soon to be engaged, just happened to work at the Israeli embassy. And even though that fact should not matter, that is the fact that everybody is leading with, because they want to make this seem more just political. They want to make this seem more normalized. They want to desensitize you to the severity of the situation, and they do so carefully through the rhetoric of their headlines. Pay attention. Always read beyond the headlines and through the lines. Okay? And now I sit here and I just think, what did you think was going to happen? When we look at the cycle that's been going on, when we look at the headlines that were just going everywhere from the UN, claiming this lie that 14,000 Gazan babies were going to die within the next 2 days, what did you think was going to happen? Again, shout out to Noy Lieb. He's an IDF soldier that I'm so excited for you guys to see my interview with him that's dropping on Tuesday. And, you know, he put this video out, and I just want to play this in full.
What the did you think was going to happen?
Ooh,
you said nothing when Kanye praised Hitler. You said nothing when to Jews was shouted across the world. You said nothing when Jewish students were locked in libraries. You said nothing when synagogues were vandalized across the world. You said nothing when hostage posters were ripped down day after day after day. And you said nothing when From the River to the Sea became an anthem. The world watched, it joined in, and now a Jewish couple was murdered in the name of Free Palestine. Free Palestine! Since October 7th, Jew hatred isn't extreme. It's something that we unfortunately see every single day. This isn't about Gaza. It's about Jews everywhere. So no, you don't get to act shocked. Not after all this. And this is why we have Israel, because we will not rely on you to protect us. Even you, the leftist Free Palestine Jews, you aren't safe either. Wake the f up.
Too accurate. Shout out to Noy. He makes incredible content. Again, he's originally from Canada. He lives over in Israel. He's an IDF soldier actively, and he makes a lot of content really getting into the tea about the war. And he does these Q&As in a story that I love, where he does not hold back. You can ask the guy anything. He's ready. Noyleyb. Go find him in his videos. So he brings up a very important question. What did you think was going to happen? Okay, how can we continue to pretend to be shocked when this has been the norm for far too long? Especially since October 7th. The anti-Semitism started before October 7th. And if you guys remember, if you guys have heard my backstory, and if you haven't, please look up my video 100 Days After October 7th, or my article in the Jewish Journal, where I go in full depth and detail about why I'm so passionate about this issue. And, you know, the original background of it is I went to Israel in June of 2023, so before October 7th, and I got so much hatred just for being there. Like, not from anybody in Israel for sure, but from the anti-Semites on the internet, and that's when I learned how much of a real thing anti-Semitism still is. So post October 7th, you can imagine how much worse things got. So I want to give you guys just some stats. You know, shout out to the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL. I want to give you guys a breakdown just so you understand just how severe this has gotten since October 7th. So the ADL has reported that over 10,000 anti-Semitic incidents from October 7th, 2023 to September 2024. That's marking a 200% increase compared to the same period in the prior year. Okay, a 200% increase in anti-Semitic incidents is crazy. This is the highest annual total since the ADL began tracking in 1979. In 2023 alone, the ADL recorded 8,873 anti-Semitic incidents, a 140% increase from the almost 3,700 incidents in 2022. Of these, over 6,500 were harassment cases, 1,840 were involved in vandalism, and 152 were physical assaults. Over 5,200 incidents occurred right after October 7th. So that, again, just paints the picture for you of how drastic these incidents have been since October 7th. Then you have college campuses where there was a massive rise in anti-Semitism, with 922 anti-Semitic incidents reported in just 2023 compared to the 200 in the prior year. And again, mind you, October 7th is clearly in October. So you can assume majority of those happened within just a couple months span. The ADL also noted that 1,352 anti-Israel rallies with anti-Semitic or anti-Zionist rhetoric post-October 7th have happened. A 2024 American Jewish Committee, AJC, shout out to AJC, they did a survey that found that 77% of American Jews felt less safe after October 7th attacks, with 90% reporting increased anti-Semitism and about 35% of Jewish college students experiencing anti-Semitism on campus. 48% felt unsafe at campus due to their Jewish identity. So again, I really want you guys to see it. Oh, and one more for you guys. FBI data shows that anti-Semitic hate crimes rose 36% from 2021 to 2022, and with 2023 seeing even further increases, particularly in cities like New York City and in Los Angeles, and in LA, there's a 48% rise. That is insane. So this shows to you, these numbers show to you that not only has it been happening, but it's continuously getting worse. And I want to say too, let me address this as straight up as possible. I have had a lot of people try to say to me that anti-Semitism is the new BLM. Now, what some people are trying to say is, okay, because there's a demographic that's being attacked and there's like a call for people to be like, let's stand up and say something about this, they're trying to equate it to BLM. There is a massive difference between what happened with BLM and combating anti-Semitism. Okay, and take this as somebody who used to be a fool supporting BLM before I really started looking for the truth and doing research and looking at things objectively. There is a night and day difference between BLM and fighting anti-Semitism. Okay, so there is so with this constant narrative of fighting anti-Semitism being the new BLM, let's break it down. BLM was a fraudulent organization that was fueled by a movement of racial division that was largely led by progressive politicians for political gain and by making up statistics and wrongly convincing Black people that we were being hunted down by the police. Okay, they would manipulate stats, they would lie straight to our faces and make it seem like there was this epidemic of Black people dying at the hands of the police, just to find out that as an unarmed Black man in America, I'm more likely to be struck by lightning and die from that than to be shot and killed by the police. Okay, that's a fact for you. Meanwhile, anti-Semitism is objectively out of control. We just saw it last night. Murdering an innocent young couple and then screaming "Free Palestine," you can't look around that. That is a straight up hate crime, objectively speaking. Okay, you have college students who are being barred from classes. I'm an eyewitness to that. I went and I broke into the UCLA encampments and did research and had a whole moment with that with Cam Higbee. And Jews are being murdered left and right, it seems like. Yet instead of it all being condemned, you have the mainstream media outlets and the elected officials who are supporting this hatred. BLM was fighting this invisible boogeyman. The Jews are fighting for their right to exist in 2025. If anything is the new BLM, really, I shouldn't even say new, which is BLM rebranded and more extreme and less researched, it's Free Palestine. Free Palestine and BLM, they are as thick as thieves. And it is clearly written out in their Marxist ideology. And a lot of people didn't even know where Palestine was on a map. I mean, it isn't on a map for good reason. But a lot of y'all didn't even know what Palestine was until October 7th and post-October 7th. But BLM has been saying Free Palestine for years. They have always been connected. There was never a degree of separation there. the intensity of the hatred towards Jews is a very real objective thing. Okay. Do we have that video of that Cam Higby posted? Did I get that to you guys in time?
Don't
Mr.
score with new
Rodriguez?
information. Last night, a 30-year-old Elias Rodriguez shot and killed 2 Israeli embassy workers outside.
This gives
of the
great
Capitol
context
Jewish
of the
Museum.
intensity.
This was during an American Jewish Committee meeting. Last night, myself and some of my journalist friends stayed up all night scouring the internet looking for this guy's digital footprint. Finally, we stumbled across his Twitter, where he posted his manifesto saying, "Escalate for Gaza, bring the war home." He openly talked about shooting people after Luigi Mangione was locked up, and he openly talked about bombing the New York Times and then bombing them again after he bombed them. How do we know this is his Twitter? From reverse image searching his LinkedIn profile picture, I did this and found his Clubhouse account. His Clubhouse account, which had the username Kyoto Loather. This turned out to be a much larger breakthrough than I thought it would be. Travis Hawley was able to find his Spotify, where he had playlists about killing cops. But what was important was the profile picture on his Spotify account. Because lo and behold, my friend Angela Vanderploym found his Twitter account that happened to be Kyoto with a D, leather, not leather, with the same profile picture as his Spotify account. Where we also obviously found his manifesto, indicating that it was, in fact, his Twitter account. And this is his second Twitter account because his first account was suspended. Here it is with the same username he has on Clubhouse. On Clubhouse, he frequented spaces about hacking the U.S. Air Force. How did he get away with talking about these things on the internet without being investigated by the FBI? It's because everybody in the anti-Israel movement talks about escalating, bringing the war home, intifada this, intifada that. Violence is justified. Resistance is justified. These are threats of violence. They should be investigated. People who make those threats should be held responsible. But since so many people do it, they aren't. Because they aren't held responsible, they continue doing it. Because they continue doing it, there is an overflow of violent threats against different institutions, and it is difficult for intelligence agencies to decipher which threats are credible and which aren't, which allow credible threats to fall by the wayside, like Elias Rodriguez, for example. People who make violent threats of terrorism should go to jail. That will certainly thin out the herd on people that are making uncredible threats.
Amazing investigative journalism there from Cam Higby. Shout out to Cam, even though he still owes me money from Catch LA, but we'll talk about that on another day. But on a serious note, like that paints the picture for you right there to show the intensity of these anti-Semitic people. Obviously, there are intensely racist people out there. There are people out there who hate every demographic. There are supremacists of every degree and like against every demographic. But when it comes to anti-Semitism, it is so urgent and it is so targeted and it is being played out in a way that other demographics are not seeing. And when it comes to BLM, it's like maybe I could have respected BLM a little bit more as a movement if they actually talked about Black Lives Mattering in general. But no, they tried to paint this false narrative that the people who were actually protecting Black people were the real villains there, the real culprits there. That is not the case, okay? BLM needs to matter. My biggest threat as a Black person is other Black people, if we're just talking stats here, okay? Excuse me. But when it comes to what Jewish people are dealing with on a global level, anti-Semitism really is that deep. It really is that intense. That is the difference. So stop making that comparison. And I don't know if other people have heard that narrative. You know, I'm deep in these circles, so I hear these things a lot. And it's very frustrating to me that people do not see the difference there. So again, great work there by Cam Higby. And, you know, I want to talk about universities, especially in the way that universities are normalizing all of this. You know, I believe we have a clip here just as a reminder of what college campuses have looked like recently when it comes to anti-Semitism.
Showing you video from 1 year ago. It was in the overnight hours here outside of Royce Hall when pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli demonstrators had violent clashes. Those clashes would lead into the next night in the overnight hours of May 2nd and the breakdown and the teardown of what had become a large pro-Palestinian encampment just outside of Royce Hall, something that NBC4 covered extensively and live throughout those overnight hours.
Yeah, so I believe when I was at UCLA with Cam, it was right before that. And I think that's also around the same time that Cam was there and got bear maced. That's how violent these Free Palestine people are. So this is a college campus, mind you. Like the fact, like this isn't just like out in these streets. This isn't some local hood. This is a college campus. This is UCLA. People fight very hard to get into UCLA. So for this to be at a more prestigious, high-end university, that is terrifying. But it really goes to show what the culture is like on these campuses. And since October of 2023, U.S. universities have seen a 321% increase in anti-Semitic incidents, with Jewish students reporting harassment, these chants from river to the sea, which is literally talking about eradicating their entire people, and very direct threats. Okay, Jewish students over at Columbia University have been facing these chants like "Go back to Europe," and with Rutgers students being threatened for holding Israeli flags. I just saw a video from Santa Monica. I wish I got it to you, Mr. Rodriguez. This video I just saw the other day on TikTok of these kids just walking down in Santa Monica, and there's people running up to them, screaming at them because they're wearing a Star of David. Okay, this is the reality of what's going on here. And these universities really need to be held accountable because, one, they're accepting way too much money from Qatar, which not everybody's ready for that conversation. Way too much money from these foreign influences that is promoting this extremist rhetoric against the Jewish community. And then you have faculty staff with professors, especially at Columbia, like Joseph Massad, who have been accused. Receipts show that they have been, but let's say allegedly, they've been promoting these anti-Israel narratives that equate Zionism with colonialism, which is so bizarre considering Zionists, like, they literally were there first, but y'all ain't ready for that kind of tea. But my audiences, my cousins are, but you know, the general public, they're afraid to have the conversation about the truth and the reality of Israel, which is not like any other land in this world. Like, that is literally the most sacred place in the world. And, you know, potentially you could tie a lot of what happened at Columbia directly to this faculty member, Joseph Massad, and the way that he has such an anti-Semitic attitude that he promotes throughout the campus. So you have these university administrators who have really fostered this intersectional hierarchy that prioritizes certain groups all over the Jewish community, allowing the anti-Semitic rhetoric to truly flourish. It is out of control, and enough is enough. The universities have blood on their hands, and the biased media has blood on their hands. And really, these Congress people who are not taking action have blood on their hands. Okay? I'm not talking to go and censor every single person who has a criticism against Israel or a criticism against the Jewish community. And I just find it funny how that's even a narrative, this whole narrative that you're not allowed to criticize Israel or Jews. If that was the case, then explain 88% of the internet at this point. Explain what's happening on these college campuses. If you weren't allowed to criticize these demographics, then why is it such a widespread narrative? I mean, look at this. Look at this. The obsession of hatred towards Israel and the Jewish community is wild to me. I also want to show you this clip from Charlie Kirk when he's sitting down with one of these kids who desperately needs to be woken up. This is how these college students are being indoctrinated.
There is no justification for the murder and mutilation of thousands of innocent people and children. Well, let's futile. Let's hear him out. There is no justification, Mr. Kirk, for invading hospitals, for bombing innocent populations and dragging out a war which is damaging Israel and the West's security.
You've made that point, but...
Well, it's not a point, it's a moral truth, isn't it?
Okay, yeah. It was also a moral truth that the war started because 1,300 Jews were killed and 200 were taken hostage. And when you declare war on Israel, expect a firestorm in reaction. Let me finish, I let you talk. Israel, at its holiest day of the calendar year besides Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, Samat Torah, the 50-year anniversary of the Six-Day War. On Shabbat, Hamas invaded Israel, deciding to go recklessly to music concerts, to homes, to kibbutzes, and taking 200 plus hostages. They knew what they were doing. In one of the most cloistered urban environments on the planet, 2 million people live in a place where it's impossible to wage war. Impossible. Where they wear civilian clothing, they violate every tenet of the Geneva Convention, and the IDF, when they do something right, they get no credit. When they do life-saving surgeries of a Gazan child, they get no credit. When they drop leaflets, they get no credit. But when they happen to bomb a place where they are operating their military from, which we now know from third-party verified sources, hundreds of Hamas military operations are in mosques, schools, and hospitals. I'm sorry, the country where they were living in relative peace on October 6th, that all of a sudden we had a war and Hamas started the war. And I don't see people that were really upset about the 2 million Germans that were killed in World War II, civilians. A tragic truth of war is that civilians die. I don't like it and you don't like it. And they brought it upon themselves. The only operation and entity to blame is the leadership of Hamas, not the Israeli government, for fighting this defensive war after they were invaded. There is a good guy and there is a bad guy. I honestly...
Isn't that the morality of a child?
Well, hold on.
That's all you have to say.
It's interesting you say that, because a child who knows that Israel is the good guy, Hamas is bad, has a lot more wisdom than a student like yourself at Cambridge University.
Oh, and that's how you clear an anti-Semite. I don't know who that child is, but he learned today, hopefully. These kids need to be woken up. They need to be reminded the truth. I mean, a lot of these kids literally just have not heard the truth. And it's really scary that the higher you see these kids being educated, the more they're indoctrinated about, transgenderism and radical antifada and all these different things. These kids need to be reminded that the place without women's rights, without LGBT rights, without, Black people being allowed to have any peace of mind, and the furthest place from DEI, it's going to be the Palestinian region, okay? They need to understand that as they scream intifada, they support these jihadi leaders. It is the antithesis of every progressive ideology that it is that they have. It will never make sense to me how these people think that they are fighting for civil rights and for peace while simultaneously supporting Hamas. So shout out to Charlie Kirk for standing on business and educating these kids, because that's what needs to happen. As Marissa Streit, the CEO of PragerU, always says, education is what got us into this mess. Education needs to be what gets us out of this mess. So I want to leave you guys with a couple things. One, it's like, what do we do from here? Urgent action. We need to be pressing on these Congress people for legislation. And again, I'm not talking just going, because shout out to Wake Up with Linda. I like her because she's really objective. She asked me today, she goes, are you asking for censorship? Is that what you're saying, to impede on, the First Amendment and freedom of speech? Not at all. I'm not saying to go and censor people. I'm saying that when there is a time, I'm not saying to go and censor people just because we don't like it, what it is that they're saying. I'm saying that the only time where you need to start stepping in is when you have people who are calling for the harm or even the death and murder of demographics of people. We are a civilized country. We are not about to be leading movements to harm people. That is not what we do here. Okay? That does not have a place on the internet for you to be calling for people to be directly harmed. And it especially doesn't have a place on college campuses where you have students who are being attacked simply because of their identity. Okay? Save that kind of rhetoric for the PDF files. If you know, you know. We need legislation, and we need, to crack down on these universities. I loved when Trump took away the money, snatched the funds away from Harvard, and, all these different universities that are promoting this type of chaos, they need to be held accountable. Okay. We need to stop allowing these university professors to indoctrinate these students with such extremist rhetoric. Either take politics totally out of it, or make it a place where there's encouraged diversity of thought so that we can have healthy conversations that aren't just two sides going head to head, which one side is trying to literally murder the other side, and the side that's about to be murdered, basically, they're just out there fighting for their right to exist. Okay? We need to step on all of that and just cut that at its source, cut that at the root. We need urgent action. It's like a state of emergency, dare I say, at this point, where we have so much hatred that's going on. And what happened to that young couple yesterday, my condolences to your family. It's absolutely tragic. And my encouragement to the Jewish community, because I know a lot of Jewish people are now terrified of the thought of going to events, going to museums, all of that. You can't live in fear. The second that you start living in fear, you have allowed the enemy to win. You have allowed evil to win. And you're so much better than that. And we cannot allow these incidents to be the reason why you are afraid to wear your Star of David or to be who you are unapologetically. Okay? You are just as safe today as you were yesterday and the day before. And while there's always a risk when you have maniacs in the world, it is not worth making yourself totally live in fear. You have to stand on truth and have faith that God has you protected.